3D the movie. This week, I thought I'd take a look at 3D films of various sorts that are available in some way for free. And 3D the movie goes back to 2017 and was one of Variety Films' first offerings. It remains for sale as a Blu-ray, but the anaglyph version has recently been uploaded on the label's channel. I imagine it as something a hungover art teacher might play for the class while she sleeps off weekend regret. Mostly a slideshow with remarks about the history of 3D and nuances of stereoscopy. Once you grow accustomed to the pace, it becomes an enjoyable gallery. Highly favoring Star Wars toys, we get treated to fairly wide stereo close-ups that may have been challenging to view if they were motion video, but as stills are a pleasure to take in. The great thing about a slow-paced visual journey is it leaves time to wonder. What is it about 3D viewing that is so special? If these toys were on my desk and I looked at them just as close, it wouldn't be a fraction as interesting as seeing them blown up on my TV. It's almost as if, for a moment, you're living with them in their space, their world. Perhaps it brings me back to a kid rolling cars over the floor when I was closer in size to them. I don't know. Probably never will. There are things, many things, that I don't understand, but I can't deny its outcome. Funny thing, though, is just from asking questions, I've gleaned a bit of knowledge of this area, and from this, I've come to believe that we don't really see in stereo, but rather treat it like a separate sense. It's my suspicion that we see flat initially, and then add information about movement from our peripheral vision, and then, and only if time allows, start to include space. Try moving your head as quickly as you can manage to look at something in an opposing direction. You may notice that the new picture has a tendency to bloom the longer you look at. The first thing is your eye looks for a focal point and then sort of builds out from it. This natural process, again in my opinion, is not augmented, but actually augmented, but actually challenged by the 3D movie experience. In VR land, we are forcing our brains to decode space as a priority. We are forced to decode it first instead of last before we can even tell what's important about it and choose a focal point. It's kind of perceiving in reverse, and maybe that's why it feels like being sucked into a different world. Senses are not where they should be. Maybe it's kind of like an LSD trip. Whatever it is, this movie gives plenty of time to soak in the 3D examples. Unlike most documentaries, it does not pummel you with information. It delivers a point and then backs off and lets you just enjoy the experience. Later on in the disc, we are treated to some historical stereo photographs that are always interesting to see. These are not conversions, but actual vintage 3D, sucking me into something of a, I don't know, do you call this an Old West playground? There are occasional pauses between the stills that felt a bit excessive. On at least one occasion, I found myself checking if there was something wrong with the TV due to the amount of time the screen was left black. Also, a surprising amount of time is not actually in 3D, especially in the later half. It's more of a discussion about stereo rather than a discussion in stereo. To that end, this might make a good program for someone who has issues processing stimulation. Overall, as a production, it can be described as first shaky steps for the boutique label. Being the early days of Variety, it is not a true 3D disc, but a side-by-side presentation that has to be manually switched into stereo mode. This might actually make it easier to watch on some VR headsets, but realistically probably only of interest to collectors of the 3D niche and Blu-ray deep divers. Later Variety discs, such as the 100 Years of 3D, may offer a little more for someone looking for 3D history presented in 3D. Just to insert a secondary review here, 100 Years of 3D covers similar territory with more 3D demonstrations, and a conversion showing what one of the earliest 3D films might have looked like if it had survived. Also, similar to what was offered on the Catwoman disc from Variety Films, we get some vintage 3D comic books deconverted from anaglyph. And unlike the Catwoman presentation, this time it's narrated at a very watchable pace by our host Jonathan. I really like that touch. But don't take my word for it. Go check out 3D the movie on his channel and, heck, go buy 100 Years of 3D. You'll enjoy it.